It's okay. Okay, so the plan today is to continue what we did actually on Thursday. If you were not here on Thursday, that's fine because it's a completely new subject. You won't miss anything if you weren't there. No big deal. And I guess what we'll do is we do every time, where we'll just we'll have the class and then while everyone's muted, we'll have the class and then we'll open up the floor for questions afterwards. My in-laws are still in town, but I'm not going to use that as an excuse to get out of answering questions. So don't worry about that.
Recording on?
I think so, yes. I think so. Okay, let us begin. We spent a lot of time discussing the 13 principles of faith, which are the authoritative and most comprehensive description of our belief system. These are the principles upon which our religion rests, and this is the basis and the framework for everything else that exists within our religion. That was authored by the Rambam, the greatest of the medieval sages, one of the greatest of the medieval sages, the Rishonim. And we spent a lot of time, 77 episodes actually, discussing every aspect and every angle to the best of our ability. Once we finish that, we have begun to explore other classic works and pieces of Jewish philosophy. We spoke a few weeks ago, we spoke about the idea of pinpointing exactly where atheists go wrong. It turns out you could be a very high IQ, capable, sharp, intellectual, rigorous scholar and still arrive at atheism, not because you don't have sufficient brain power or enough IQ points, but because the root of heresy is not in the brain, it is in the heart, as the verse tells us. Don't deviate after your heart. And last time we spoke about the introduction to the Sefer Hachinuch, which I will remind you, this is a book of unknown authorship that was authored in the 1300s or so, and it delineates the 630 mitzvos in the order in which they appear in the Torah, and gives a short overview of each one of these mitzvos. And in his introduction, he addresses several major questions on Jewish philosophy. And the first question that we talked about last time is, how do we know it's true? We have the Almighty's holy Torah, but maybe, just maybe, it was all made up. Maybe it's a hoax. It's a psyop. That's a very serious and very legitimate question, and one that he addresses, and he spoke about the idea of testimony, and why testimony creates believability, and why we can assume veracity when there is testimony. And of course, more people testifying to an event, that gives us more believability. With fewer people testifying to an event, we have less believability. And then he focuses on the founding event of our religion, the Sinai revelation, where we have 600,000 adult male eyewitnesses, not including adult females or children. They witnessed prophecy. They experienced prophecy. They heard God communicating with Moshe, and they had installed in their heart a belief that everything that Moshe is telling them is indeed true. He is a true prophet, and thus we heard the Ten Commandments, we heard the overview of our faith, of our religion from God directly, and then the details were spelled out to us by Moshe, the legitimate prophet of God, and we know that for sure. Our religion was founded on miracles, and there were many miracles contemporaneous to the Sinai revelation. Of course, for 40 years, the nation was eating manna and drinking water that came out of a rock. And they experienced the 10 plagues in Egypt, and the plagues and the miracles at the splitting of the sea, and the many, many, many other miracles that the founding generation witnessed. But the one that tops it all is the experience at Sinai, where everyone was elevated to a level of prophecy, and that removed any doubt. It dispelled any doubt about the veracity of the Torah and of Moshe as being the prophet, the father of all prophets, who is conveying to us the exact word of God. And we can become very comfortable in believing the veracity and the historicity of the Torah. And we can be more comfortable that not only is this believable, but there's more evidence and more support and more logic behind it, more than any other historical event. I used to have a very sharp formulation. There are a group of people, unfortunately, who are Holocaust deniers. And even though there's such an abundance of evidence, and the perpetrators themselves testified to it, and the documentation and the eyewitness accounts and the other historical facts are really undeniable, but people will find a way to deny because of one reason or another. And it's irritating and it's enraging to hear where people just deny this, this worst atrocity in all of human history, which happened recently. People will deny it. So I have a particularly sharp formulation that's irritating to some people, and I apologize. There's way, way, way more evidence to the sign of Revelation than to the Holocaust. There are more people who witnessed it, and they witnessed it all at once, and they perpetuated it to their children, and no one ever challenged it. And again, I mentioned this last time, this generation, they executed people for what we would think, absent the Torah, were very minor offenses. One guy carries twigs on Shabbos. Come on, is that such a serious crime? In our eyes, it wouldn't be. But because we know that the Almighty said that Mechalaleh Amos Yumas, those who violate the Shabbos shall be executed, we did it. We executed based upon our 100% believability. We were 1,000% convinced that this was real, and this was divine, and this is proper, and this is true. That's the first subject that the Sefer Hachinuch addresses in his introduction. And then he proceeds to address some very other interesting questions, like why did God create humans? Maybe that could be a broader question. Why did God create the world? He does not address that question, even though it is addressed, the world and the universe, even though it is addressed in other classical Jewish sources. Maybe we will get to them. But why did God create humans? And why did God give us such a precious Torah? And of course, the question is amplified once we have an understanding that God needs nothing. He doesn't benefit from anything that we do. He doesn't benefit from anything that we do. So why did he give us the Torah? And the implication of this question, maybe you could say the Almighty wanted the world that he created to endure, and humanity has the capacity to be very destructive. And therefore, maybe he should have given us a more rudimentary system of laws, a basic code to live by. But the Torah is not just a code. It's not just a code of conduct. It's not just rules for living. It is that plus so much more. It's so lofty. It's so transformative. It's so heavenly. We know that it's so inseparable from God himself. The best way to cleave to God is via his Torah. It precedes the world. It is the blueprint, in fact, that God used to create the world. The Talmud tells us that when Moshe went up to heaven to get the Torah, so after the sign of revelation, God appears upon the mountain, and the nation experiences what no other people has ever experienced: prophecy, mass prophecy, national revelation. Moshe goes up to heaven to get the Torah, and that's very unusual. There's someone in heaven who shouldn't be there. There is a creature of flesh and blood born to a woman in heaven. And the angels tell God, or inquire, what is an earthling doing amongst us? And God responds, well, he's here to get the Torah. And the angels couldn't believe it. This holy Torah, this precious Torah, this precious hidden treasure that you, God, created 974 generations before you created the universe. It's like the earliest creation of God. And it's so lofty. You want to give it to humanity? To flesh and blood? That's sort of the question that he's asking here as well. We have such a lofty Torah, such a heavenly Torah. Why was that given to us? What is the reason? This is, I'm starting to read the inside here. What is the reason that the Almighty gave such a precious Torah to humanity? God owns everything. And his greatness and his splendor and his glory is infinite. And the fact that there are some humans who have a little bit understanding of God via his Torah, that doesn't make God's honor any bigger, any greater. Because if God's honor and glory is infinite, well, infinite, you can't add or subtract from it. So there's no way for us to impact, so to speak, the honor and the glory and the splendor of God. Why do we have a Torah? And he's going to answer the question. Well, first he's going to say we really don't have a correct answer to the question. But when he does answer the question, he's going to also say, well, why do we exist? So this is kind of a really foundational, fundamental insight that we're going to hear. But again, the first thing he tells us is that our capacity to ask this question and to get an answer and to get an accurate answer, that is severely limited. Why? Because our intellect, compared to God's intellect, it's very small. The ways of God, the thoughts, so to speak, of God are way loftier than our thoughts. We are a little bit hubristic in thinking just the extent of our own mind and own intellect. But imagine you were to consult a bunch of bugs about quantum mechanics, string theory, and you gather some bugs together and you say, let's talk about it. Well, it's silly because they don't have the mind, the understanding, the vocabulary, the means of communication. There's no way for you to possibly talk to them about this. There's a very big gulf separating your intelligence and theirs. Now, what's the gulf separating our intelligence and God's? It's way more than the distance between a bug and a human and a scientist, even PhD level. I imagine the difference between that times 500 million, okay? That's the difference between our intellect and God. Really, it's a lot more. It's infinite. But how can we possibly even be so bold and audacious to think that we can actually get an answer to this question? How can we possibly get an answer to this question? We don't have the ability at all to understand the ways of God. Nevertheless, there's something that we can understand. The Almighty did everything for a reason. There's nothing that exists that's purposeless. If we find something which is purposeless, it's only because we don't have the understanding of God, of course, to understand why he created it. And we can find maybe a little bit of a reason as to why the Almighty gave us his Torah. Now, we'll point out, just as an aside, this is emblematic of a lot of this book. Again, this is an introduction to a book that talks about mitzvos. 613 mitzvos, and organized in the order which appears in the Torah. And in every mitzvah, he gives us a little bit of an overview of the mitzvah, a little snapshot of the mitzvah, but also he talks about the reason for a mitzvah. And many times throughout his book, he says, well, the real reason for any mitzvah is because Well, God told you to do it. You listen. And you cannot possibly fathom the ways of God and the full extent of the reasons why God said what he said, why God did what he did. But nevertheless, maybe there's some little bit of understanding that can even be understood by a puny human brain. Same thing over here. The question, why do we have such a holy, lofty, elevated, ethereal Torah? That question we don't really have an answer to. Nevertheless, there's a little bit of understanding that we can glean. And he tells us that after God decided to create the world, if he's going to do it, he's going to do it perfectly. And this is a theme we see throughout all the classic works on our philosophy. The world, the universe, the systems that the Almighty put in place, it's perfect. It's not in any way imperfect. And therefore, there has to be perfection in every manner of the world. And there cannot be any part of or any sort of creation that does not exist. It can't be that there's something that we could point to and say, well, why don't we have this? We should have this, because that would make the world more perfect. And therefore, we will find in the world, in existence, in created existence, really everything. And then he really classifies the two types of creation and then the human. He says we have angels. What's an angel? So, of course, we know nothing really about angels. But he defines angels as spiritual beings with no corporeality, no body, no material substance, no physical existence, just spiritual, what we could call maybe intellectual existence. Even though we find in the Torah, angel takes up a human form, the three angels come to visit Abraham and so on. The angel that God revealed to Bilam and so on, many examples of it. But the essence of an angel is a spiritual creation with no physicality. And what that means, this is the subtext of what he's saying, is that there's no conflict really in an angel. Angel is not conflicted because it's just a spiritual creation with no physical component to it. So it's just spiritual. It is what it is. There's no dynamism in the angel. There's no existential conflict in the angel because the angel is just the angel. It's just a spiritual creation of God. And then on the completely opposite end of the spectrum, you have physical beings without any spiritual essence. And those are the animals. Now, again, it's important to note, there's nothing that's just physical and not spiritual. Everything must have some sort of spark of spirituality, otherwise it would not have any existence. If it's completely divorced from the spiritual realm, it must cease to exist. It cannot endure. So it has some animating spiritual spark to it, but as a creation of God, this is a physical creation and not a spiritual creation. And that's why, like angels, animals are not conflicted. They are what they are. They do what they are programmed to do. I once heard it pointed out, which is fascinating. I don't remember where I heard it. So forgive me for not attributing this. Animals never, ever, ever, ever look to the heaven. The idea of the human experience where we gaze at the galaxies and we look at the cosmos and we wonder, and we think about just that grand universe that's out there and what's there. It's so mysterious to us. And we have a yearning to know more. Like that's not an experience that animals have. And some say, well, sometimes the wolves they turn to heaven. That's not because that's how they want to make their cry. The coyote is giving a yelp or whatever the proper term is. That's not the ubiquitous human experience of knowing or yearning to know more about what's outside of us, what's beyond what we can interact with. That's not an animal experience. The animal doesn't have that draw to the spiritual. Many of the ancient books on philosophy note that the animals, they're on four legs, right? They're horizontal creatures, whereas humans are vertical. And the reason is because humans, we are the hybrid. This is the point that he's going to say. Humans are half angel, half spiritual creation, and half beast, half animal, half physical creation. And these are total opposites that are bound together in a way that only God can do. Now, so this is the answer to his question. Well, why do humans exist? Humans exist because there's this creation of God that really we would want to exist. If it didn't exist, we would say, well, why does this not exist if it did not exist? And therefore God said, okay, I'm going to make something that only I can do, this mashup, this fusion of total opposites. The angel and the animal do not interface. There's no possible way for those two to interface. They're opposites. And somehow within a human, the divine will dictated that the angel and the beast merge, fuse together, which is why, again, to that earlier point, which is why humans are vertical. On one hand, our feet are touching the ground. We're connected, we're bound to the physical. On the other hand, our aspirations, our mind, our angelic half is kind of being drawn to the heavens, to where it comes from. The body comes from the dust. It's from the physical, from the material, from the substance, from the thing that really does not really appear to be very, very different from animals. In fact, animals, many of them are more robust than we are more talented, faster runners, higher jumpers, and so on. They could survive even without a job. The Talmud points this out. You've never seen a rabbit with an MBA. Not that would help you necessarily. You never see an accountant, okay, that's also happens to be, a bunny rabbit or a squirrel. You don't have, lawyers that are sharks. Oh, actually, you do have that. Okay, sorry. Okay, forgive that. Just delete that from your memory. How come? Because the Almighty creates these physical beings that they can exist without having a profession, without having an occupation. Physically, they're more gifted than us. They know innately which berries are safe and which are unsafe, and how to find water and how to sense danger and how to fight off enemies and so on. We're a pretty mediocre beast at that. But of course, we have the intellect, we have the angelic half, and that's a creation of God that's unlike any other. And if the angels are not conflicted and the animals are not conflicted, we very much are. Because there's a war, a civil war within every human. On one hand, they're just drawn to the physicality, to the life of the body, like an animal. On the other hand, they have aspirations, or at least the capacity to have lofty ambitions, the ambitions of an angel, and those two are not compatible, and therefore they're being pulled in each direction, and that's why the life is conflicted. And that's why some humans, there's such a broad spectrum of humans. You have people that are just terrible, awful humans who do terrible things, who do things that are way worse than any animal can possibly do. But of course, you have the humans who are so beautiful and so wonderful and so refined and so angelic. And those two are the same species. Why? Because that is the definition of humanity. We have the angel within us, we have the beast within us, and actually the beast that we have is the worst beast of them all. And the angel that we have is the best angel of them all. And we're thrown into this civil war. That's humans. And for this reason, we have Torah. For absent the Torah, continues the Sefer Hachinuch, if not for the fact that we got Torah, there will be no way for our angel to assert itself. And the capacity, the tools, the hardware of spirituality will be drawn after the physicality, after the inherent internal beast within us. And we will be drawn only to our physical experiences, to our physical desires and lusts and humanity. As the verse says in Psalms 49:13, could be very, very similar to an animal. The experiment of creation is the creation of this thing called a human. Will this thing go this way or that way? And the Torah is given to humanity. It's given to us in order to draw us towards our angelic self. The Torah started off was with the angels. Moshe comes, I'm going to get the Torah. Why? Why are you human getting the Torah? Well, what does Torah have to do with humanity? Well, it has a lot to do with humanity because really humans should be like angels. And thus we're going to get the Torah that really the angels harbored, and this will make us empowered. It will empower our spiritual halves and elevate it and suppress our physical halves and enable us to transfer, so to speak, our identity to be more angel, less beast. We have the ability to be an angel, not just any angel, the loftiest of angels. And the Torah, well, that's the tool to shift us, to pivot us, to move us in the direction of our angelic half and away from the dangers that lie of us being just like an animal, and a mediocre animal at that. So this to me, like just a fascinating piece. Like this is an introduction to a book, one of the great classic works of its kind. And in his introduction, he's dealing with all these fantastic and stimulating and intriguing different questions on our religion and our faith. Now, we'll kind of maybe add a little bit of some commentary to what he's saying over here. He defined humans as half animal, half beast, not compatible at all, but we can choose where along that spectrum we're going to live. Like we could be like animals, way worse even than animals, and we could live like angels, maybe even better than angels, but it's our choice, and the Torah is the tool to help us become more angels. If you examine the Torah, we have positive mitzvos, performative mitzvos, and negative mitzvos. Some perhaps may argue and say that there's really a dual purpose of Torah. One, to distance yourself from your potential of being like an animal, and one, to bring yourself close to your potential of being an angel. And that's why we have two parts of Torah. The negative mitzvos, the transgressions that we're trying to avoid, those are all things that will make us more animalistic. And thus, to neutralize our penchant for physicality, our liability to become more like an animal, we have those things that say, okay, don't do that. You may want to do that. It may feel very natural to do that. Don't do it. Some say, well, I want to do it. So why is the Torah telling me no? Well, that's exactly the point. Of course you want to do it because you have animalistic tendencies. It's built into the fabric of your existence. And that's precisely why the Torah says don't do that, because if you do that, you're going to veer more and more towards the animal half. And then you have mitzvos that you may feel, well, I don't feel it as like, I don't understand why I'm wrapping tefillin and why I'm having the mezuzah on my door and why I have all these positive mitzvos, 248 of them. Well, that is to change who you are, to change what you are, to make you more of an angel. Now, the Torah itself, as we mentioned, it's very lofty. You can read the Torah at a very simple level, but there's endless levels and depth and profundity and dimensions to Torah. Once you understand the Torah at a basic level, you want to graduate to the next level. Because again, the Torah It's like the knowledge of the angels. It's like the study protocol of the angels. But it's even loftier than the angels because the angels themselves are not on that same spiritual plateau, on the same spiritual level as the Torah. And we can try to get as deep as we can in the Torah because we can actually exceed the level of the angels. And thus, the reason why the Torah has so many layers is because it's there to unearth from within ourselves that capacity to be very, very lofty. So that's why humans exist. That's why the Torah was given to us, or at least that's an argument that can be made in that favor. No, he's not claiming that this is the answer. It's an answer. It's a little bit of an answer. We're buds trying to figure out some answers to serious questions. And this is an answer that works for us, that makes sense to us. And then he proceeds with another question. Well, if Torah is there to perfect humanity, why is it not universal? The sign of revelation was given to one nation. And yes, it's true, there were the mixed multitude that joined. So there were some members of other nations that joined the nation and became part of the greater Jewish people. But maybe the sign of revelation should have been in front of everyone. Everyone sees the same sun or the same moon. So have a sign of revelation that is witnessed by everyone. Wouldn't that be a good idea? Well, after all, humans are humans. And any human that has a soul really has the capacity to be higher than an angel. So why not make it universal? This is a good question. Now, I think some people maybe ask the question in a way that's not really a problem. Some people say, well, Torah is racist because it's not universal. Or Torah is xenophobic, it's elitist. It's exclusive and it excludes others. So of course we know the answer is that, well, Jews come in all races and it's open to anyone who wants to join. In fact, we cannot deny anyone from converting. There was a man, we could call him the butcher of Judea. He was the general of Nebuchadnezzar, and he's the one who's responsible for the destruction of Judah. His name was Nebuzaradan, not to be confused with Nebuchadnezzar, long Babylonian names that start with the letter N. His body count, what's the body count for Nebuzaradan? 3 orders of magnitude more than the butcher of Hachinuch, Sinwar. More than 1 million Jews he killed. And our sources tell us that he converted. Well, if he was allowed to convert, no one can be denied this right. So you can't say that the Torah is exclusive because it's open to anyone who wants to join. But his question is, well, God should have given it to everyone to begin with. Why is it only to one nation? And again, he answers the question by saying, we don't really have a full answer. We don't know. We're bugs trying to ask very serious questions. Nevertheless, I will give you an answer. And what he says is that there is diversity in the world. In every matter in this world, in this physical world, there's diversity. And some things are better than others. For example, there's some land that's very fertile. It's rich with nutrients, and whatever you plant there grows beautifully. And some places, well, it's okay, but the yield will not quite be as bountiful. And some places are more beautiful than other places. They're more aesthetically pleasing. Very few people come for a tropical or a vacation in Houston. It's not a place that people want to go to. They want to go to Santorini or Italy or Japan or Napa. They want to go to like nice places. It's just the way it is. Not every part of America is a national park, right? It's just not. Some places are nicer, some places are less nice. Some fruits are very tasty and delicious, and some, this is a special type. You have Wagyu beef, right? The best kind of beef, I've been told. There's beef in it, and then there's Wagyu, right? Just way better. And some of them are better, some are worse. Secretariat. Like a tremendous machine. He was a horse, lots of horses, but this horse was in a class of his own. There's diversity in the world. Some are better, some are worse. There is diversity amongst humanity. You have some people that could dunk a basketball. And then you have the yeshiva guys that wish they could do it. They just can't. Some people have said, it's not me, some others have said, there's more Jewish owners than Jewish players. You're just designed, it's easier for you to own the team than to play on the team. It's just the way it is. You were endowed with certain skills, and everyone has certain areas where they're better and other areas where they're worse. And there's only a few people who are absolutely exceptional in any field. And therefore, amongst humanity, there's one nation that is most spiritually sensitive. And it's a small nation, 0.2%. That's like, Mensa. Right? How many people are part of Mensa? You have to be very intelligent, apparently. But it's like what? The top 1%, the top half of 1%, the top 0.1 of 1% of the IQ scores. Not everyone's part of Mensa. Sorry, not everyone's that bright. Would you believe it? 50% of the world is below average IQ. Just by definition, right? You want to be part of Mensa? Well, it's only the 0.1%. When it comes to developing a relationship with the Almighty and having the spiritual sensitivity required to appreciate the Torah in its entirety, there's only 0.1% of the world, 0.2% of the world that qualifies. And yes, he tells us, all of humanity is given a little bit of Torah. That's the 7 universal laws, the 7 Noahide laws. So all of humanity is expected to be loftier than animals, to be more elevated, to make sure that they do embrace their angelic self. You realize you're a human, you're not an animal. But only one nation, point whatever percent of the world, they have all of Torah with the ability to achieve these transcendental heights because they are the nation that is most fitting for that role. And then he adds, even amongst the nation itself, there is a different class. You have the tribe of Levi, the Levites. The Levites, of course, the one family amongst the Levites, that's the Kohanim, the priests. I want to be a Levite. Sorry, buddy, you can't. If you're not a Levite, you're not a Levite. If you're not a Kohen, you're not a Kohen. Why? Because they are the 0.1% of the 0.1%, and therefore they have the ability, the capacity to do the service in the temple, to perform the services of the Levites. They're in a class of their own. And then he adds, in the world, in the Kadur Haaretz, in the globe, there's one place that's most choice, the choicest place. There's one land that is special and more special than any others. In this place, a person can connect with their spiritual halves greater, in a more profound and robust way than in any other place. That, of course, is the land of Israel, we call it today. The Holy Land, and even within the land of Israel, there's Jerusalem, which is the holiest city. And even in Jerusalem, there's the holiest little neighborhood. And even there, the Temple Mount, there's one particular spot, which is the place where the Evan Shasia was, where the foundation stone was. That's the place that's most lofty and elevated and spiritual of all places. Not every place is like that. And the desire, the plan of God is to take the choicest nation with the choicest Torah in the choicest place, and therefore to have this bastion of holiness and service of God. That is the desire of the Almighty. I will add, he doesn't say this. Again, there's more answers to these questions. Sefer Hachinuch is addressing some of the most important questions of our faith and our religion. And today we talked about, why humans exist and why we have Torah and why it's exclusive to the Jewish nation. And his answer is that, well, these people they're better equipped to be able to absorb the Almighty's holy Torah. I will add that there's also a historical component to this. He doesn't say it, but this is an idea that makes a lot of sense to me, and I believe it's also sourced in some of the other classic takes on this question. And that is, there was a man named Abraham who, on his own, despite being in a cesspool of idolatry, despite growing up without really any leg up spiritually, he had the tenacity and the fortitude, the strength of character to be able to discover the reality of God on his own, to be able to identify that point of holiness, that point of angelic holiness that he had within him, and to develop it and to suppress his physicality and to become more angel than beast. Not only that, to become more angel than angels. And he achieved something which was not only a great accomplishment, but also something which can be bequeathed onward. And he bequeathed it to Isaac, who on his own would have been an Abraham-like character. Had he if you just judge Isaac in a vacuum, Isaac himself was on the same level, on that lofty pantheon of the forefathers. And then Jacob and so on, and what they accomplished was transmitted to their children in a form of, I'm forgetting the word, I think it's epigenetics. In a form of epigenetics, they had the ability to not only develop themselves and refine themselves and empower their souls at such a high level, some element of what they accomplished was transmitted and bequeathed to their descendants. A. B, there's something else that our nation had, and that is we went through 400 years of servitude. And why exactly that helps, it's a different question. But that is part of the rigorous training that our people had to be able to receive the Torah. Like the Talmud says, the Torah is only given to those who ate manna. You had to have all that history in order to be able to receive the Torah. So this is maybe a bit of a subtler point. There is a protocol that's needed to receive the Almighty's Holy Torah. And that is to be a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to have the experience of the enslavement to Pharaoh in Egypt and the Exodus from Egypt, and to witness the Sinai revelation with all that demands from a person. And in effect, the act of conversion is the act of simulating becoming a descendant of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and going through the experience of the Exodus and witnessing personally the Sinai revelation. Because those are all prerequisites to be part of this nation, the nation that is capable and has the aptitude and the spiritual power to be able to appreciate the Almighty's Holy Torah in its fullest, not just 7 mitzvos, but all 613. Next time, we will continue studying the Sefer Hachinuch's introduction. He's going to pivot to other very fascinating, intriguing elements of Jewish philosophy: reward and punishment, the world to come, why bad things happen to good people, why is there a need to have a spiritual world, a physical world, the world of the angels, what about Messiah, how come the world to come is not explicit in Scripture? A lot of these foundational questions that undergird our religion, he will address it in his introduction. Again, we have a study here of a classic work, one of the works that, again, is hundreds of years old, 700 or so years old, this book. And it became a very widely accepted work. And he's addressing in his introduction some of the important questions that we need to know. So we had the first installment last time. This is the second installment. Please God, we will wrap it up with the third installment, the study of the introduction of the Sefer Hachinuch and the fantastically interesting and important subjects of inquiry that he addresses in his introduction. And please God, we will continue from the Torah Center in Houston, Texas. My email address is rabbiwolbe@gmail.com. I look forward to your questions, comments, and your feedback.